She's conservative and I'm liberal, and yet we've been friends for almost 40 years. Everyone says you shouldn't discuss politics, religion, or money. And we say that's exactly what friends should be talking about. Join us as we tackle the conversations you're having in your head, but are too scared to say out loud. Welcome to We've Got to Talk. Welcome, Jolene, and welcome, Layla Zaidane.
We are so excited to have Layla joining us today. Layla Zaidane is the president and CEO of Future Caucus, the largest nonpartisan organization of young lawmakers in the United States. Future Caucus works with over 2,000 millennial and Gen Z elected leaders in Congress and state legislatures to bridge divides, collaborate on future-oriented policy, and scale a healthy culture of democracy. That is a lot of stuff. Thank you, Layla, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, we have too. We absolutely have too. I mean, there's so much to get into, but before we get into the nitty-gritty of Future Caucus, let's talk about Layla Zaidane. Where do you come from, Layla Zaidane? What's your background? I saw from some interviews I've listened to that your parents immigrated from Morocco.
Both of my parents immigrated to New York from Morocco. They actually didn't know each other, so they came alone because of the American dream, the promise for a better life, economic opportunity. And so they met in New York, fell in love, had a family, me and my sister, and we grew up in Westchester, New York. I moved to DC I came to college here. And so the reason was to study international politics. I was really interested in diplomacy, building bridges across countries.
So from the beginning?
From the beginning, yeah. And I mean, kind of a sad reason, because my family is Arab and we lived in New York. I was in 8th grade when 9/11 happened.
I was lower in Manhattan, so I saw the first plane hit Tower 1.
Oh my God.
And I think about how
horrible.
Awful it was as a 30-year-old, but I was thinking about, like, I had a feeling that you were going to say this, and I was like, what's it like as a kid to experience this?
I mean, it's so confusing on so many levels. Obviously, this sense of safety being lost, this sense of your childhood is a before and after, certainly for everyone. And I think for me specifically, I had always been really proud to be the American cousin with all my Moroccan cousins back in Casablanca. And after 9/11 happened, obviously, horrible moment for our country, but also really confusing for me to be told I had to choose between being American or being Arab. And like, that was also really difficult to work through. And so that's actually what made me want to work in diplomacy and want to figure out how do we help countries collaborate more easily, connect more easily, feel a sense of belonging. I don't know that I could have articulated that in the 8th grade, but that's what drove me here to DC. And I ended up working in U.S. politics, like a lot of millennials. I graduated into the Great Recession, lucky me. And the jobs that were available here in D.C. for somebody like me ended up being in U.S. politics. So that's where I really learned how like things work in this country, not at a sort of macro international scale. And I think it's just really cool to think back on the studies that I had in diplomacy and international relations now actually being applied domestically.
Yes.
A lot of bridges that need to be built right here at home before we even think about some of the international bridges that I thought I wanted to be working on.
You studied international relations, and then how did you didn't immediately create Future Caucus. Like, what happened to get you to where you are now?
So a whole bunch of accidents,
As life is.
As life is. And it totally makes sense in the rearview mirror now. I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday. But while I was going through it, it felt super random. So the first thing that I actually did after graduating is I worked at this basically online coupon company called Living Social. I don't know if people remember Groupon, Living Social. There were these, like, you could pay $25 and get $50 to a restaurant or something like that. And so I worked there in sales because that literally was the only kind of job you could get in the height of the Great Recession in 2009. I loved it. I was, really surprised that, somebody who had gone to college and studied all this, fancy stuff. I went to school where, Madeleine Albright was teaching. And I was calling people on the phone, asking them, do you want to, sell a Brazilian bikini wax for 50% off on our website? But I think what it taught me a lot was, how to talk to people, how to hear no, how to keep going, how to persuade. And it was also at, the very forefront of how we were really, I think, using social media and digital communications in a powerful way to move people to action. And so I did that for a while, again, really loved it. And then the job that I got working at a think tank here in DC, so this the US politics part, was doing digital communications for them, which totally makes sense now, but felt I was just trying to shoehorn my way in. And the part of the think tank that I was working for worked with young people. It's called Generation Progress. And we worked with young people and, on college campuses just across the country to try to get them involved in politics. Okay, so here's the thing is I started doing that, and this might resonate with the two of you. It felt like we were making arbitrary barriers between who's in this group and who's in that group and who should be a part of talking about this solution or that solution. And that the way we were organizing it party-wise was not actually the way that the problems were impacting the young people that I was seeing. Affordability of higher education was hitting people whether you were a Democrat or a Republican. And so we ought to be talking to Democrats and Republicans. And yet the think tank I was working at really was sort of primarily concerned with one side of the aisle. And so I think that was my first thought of there should be a better way to create infrastructure around how do you just get people, not party labels, together to talk about things.
Wow. Yeah.
So this is around, let's see, 2015 now. I've been doing Living Social. Then I was at the think tank for a while, Center for American Progress, what it was called. And the organization existed before me. So I didn't found it. It was called Millennial Action Project, and it was just getting going. And the person who started it was trying to make it be a thing. They wanted it to be not just in Congress, but in all 50 states. And they needed somebody who knew what it was like to work in a big organization, to have HR policies and budgets. And it was a startup. And I had worked at a startup, and I had worked in politics and policy with young people. And so those two things combined made me really excited to go work at something new that was thinking about how do we create new infrastructure for the rising young leaders in our country to feel like they can build relationships along a generational identity, not along a party identity. And how can I actually help build the organization around this idea, this mission and vision? And it felt like the job was totally invented for me. So I'd started as COO, and then when the founder left, I've been running it since. So I've been there since 2016. I've been the CEO since 2021.
Is that when it changed to Future Caucus?
Yes. And so this is so sad for me as a millennial, but our focus at Future Caucus is working with young elected officials. And when we started in 2016, young and millennial were synonyms. Today,
welcome to aging. It's really fun.
Man. It's brutal. It's brutal. And so, we had to kind of get ahead of that. And we had some Gen Zers who were getting elected, who were joining our network. It was getting really confusing. And so, once I took over, we did a whole rebrand. We called it Future Caucus. And now really the focus is we want to keep millennials involved. As long as I'm here, millennial will be synonymous with young in my heart. But we also want to make sure that Gen Z and soon Gen Alpha and, whoever comes behind them feel like this is a place where they can come build relationships across lines and actually do something productive inside our democratic institutions to solve problems for people. Because that's why you run for office in the first place, is you want to be a leader and you want to help your community get better and thrive.
Tell me how many people that you're working with that are on the state level, state legislatures versus Congress.
Yeah, so Future Caucus started in Congress, actually. So the very first thing we ever did was launch a caucus in Congress. We had maybe about 20 members of Congress join. Maybe it was less than that for the very first year. Maybe it was closer to 10. Because you have to think, like in 2016, there really weren't a lot of young legislators in office. But the idea really grew so quickly. So in Congress, we still have the only, I believe, bipartisan caucus exclusively for younger members of the legislature. So that's like 45 years old and younger is really what the general cutoff is. Although I always say we don't check IDs. So if you want to come and you have a youthful spirit and a desire to collaborate, you're in. But really quickly, we started getting phone calls from people in state legislatures saying, hey, I want a young person caucus in my legislature too. Will you come and help us? And honestly, like we're based in DC, we had been really focused at the federal level. The state strategy hadn't been something we were really proactively building out. But the first state to call us was Hawaii. And so when Hawaii calls you and says, will you come here and help us start something, you kind of have to say yes. And
let me get my sunscreen.
Exactly.
And my bikini.
We'll be right there. And so we helped them launch a caucus. Today we're in 36 state legislatures. Oh, wow. Since we started, about 2,000 elected officials have been a part of one of our programs or one of our local caucus chapters. And so because there's so many states relative to Congress, like the lion's share of our work really is at the state level, which I think is really hopeful in this moment because, we see what's happening at the national level. It feels a lot more unproductive than it once did. There's a lot of really amazing stuff happening at the state level, and a lot of them, people who end up statewide or national, get their start in a state legislature. So we're really trying to cultivate from the ground up.
Is there an analysis that you've done between Republicans, Democrats, and independents that are involved in Future Caucus?
So the way we set it up is actually every caucus has to have an equal number of Democrats and Republicans at the leadership level. So every single caucus has co-chairs. And it'll be one Democrat, one Republican. Sometimes it's 2 and 2. But we won't help you start a caucus unless there's an exactly equal number who are the leaders. Now, in a state like Vermont, there's a lot more Democrats in the state. So there's a lot more Democrats in the Vermont Future Caucus compared to a state like Arkansas, right? And so nationally, I would say we're at roughly like a 60-40, 60% Democrats, 40% Republicans, like of the membership broadly, just based on like the demographics of who is in elected office, right? Now among 45-year-olds and younger. But
I was going to say, and young too, and right? Young. So then so then there's that.
Yeah. Okay. But we're super intentional about the leadership level needing to be exactly 50-50. And then the national programming that we do. So like we just recently had a big event called Future Summit, and making sure that the people who are in the room there, that we're cultivating like as close to 50-50 partisan balance as possible. Because listen, that's why lawmakers are coming to Future Caucus. Like they actually really want to learn from and engage with people who are different from them or across the aisle. So it's really important to the culture and impact of the work to like really create that mix.
Okay, we do want to talk about the summit, but we want to go back just so that our listeners and viewers understand what Future Caucus is. What is the mission? What is like the number one priority? What do you want to tell our listeners about Future Caucus?
So we really believe that good public leadership is contagious. And we see young lawmakers, young leaders, young people today as the highest leverage opportunity to really create that change across systems, across our country, across our politics. And so what Future Caucus does is we help them build relationships across the aisle and work on policy solutions together so that political polarization is not an obstacle to solving problems. That's it. It's such a simple notion of how can we help you see each other as humans, come to the table with empathy, see each other as part of the same team and not as my enemy who I have to defeat. And that mindset shift, right? It just offers people a way to get off of this doom loop that we see in our politics where, it's like from like Romeo and Juliet, where you just like hate the other family, but you can't actually like remember why you hate them, but you do. We want to offer people a place where they can go to sort of unlearn that, unwind that, find people who they share a lot in common with, actually, once they get to know them. And then we have infrastructure, both nationally and, as I mentioned, in states, to actually then help them do whatever it is that they want to do together. And some people it's, a specific kind of policy. Some people it's they want to do more public engagement with like younger constituents across the state. Some of them just need their own leadership development training, and we offer a lot of that professional development. There's actually like not a lot of professional development that gets offered to state lawmakers. So we want to just help them be successful, and we have created this network of lawmakers who are Democrats, Republicans, and where there are independents, in like Maine and Alaska, they're part of the work as well. But where they see each other not as like a party label, but just another young person getting their start in politics who wants to help other people.
Your focus is more on the generational identity than the partisan identity. And you think that the younger generation has that ability to reach across the aisle, or you're giving them the help with doing that. Are us older people, are we a lost cause?
No.
I mean, is there any thought of, okay, maybe integrating the younger folks with the older folks, or, I mean,
totally.
What's that mind shift?
Totally. Well, I think there's two things, and I would hate for people to take away that there's any kind of generational warfare. That's not at all. There was a period of time where, I don't know if you remember this, but okay boomer was like a thing people said, and I got asked all the time if we were like hating on boomers. So that was sort of a cultural moment I'm glad has sort of passed, because I think it's really important to have the wisdom and experience of all generations. And the problem today is, have you heard the word gerontocracy?
I can understand what it means.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like I keep reading articles about the gerontocracy, which is that there are a lot of older leaders, and they are the ones making all of the decisions rather than, Jolene, what you just said, how do we integrate all of the generations together? And so you start to have decisions or even priorities that reflect maybe what one specific generation cares about, but not like a fully inclusive set of issues or solutions that are things that maybe more middle age or younger people care about. And so we think it's really important to have people be able to work together. And that's something that we do a lot of. Also, just pragmatically, a lot of the older generations are your committee chairs or your party leadership. And so it's important to build good relationships with them. But I also think that younger people do bring some unique skills that we ought to be nurturing and growing. They bring a sense of open-mindedness because they haven't been doing the job as long. And sometimes that's, a negative because you're still so green. But in a lot of times, it's a real positive because it means that you're not thinking inside the box every time or trying the same thing that's been tried 100 times before. You're bringing sort of more entrepreneurial thinking or more, creative thinking. I think there's also, for better or worse, a little bit of and I say this kindly, a sense of impatience among sort of younger generations. And I think how we see that translated often in politics is that they don't want to wait for, one party to finally be in control in order to do XYZ policy. They'll work with anybody to do the thing that they believe needs to get done. And so that's actually a huge opportunity, sort of channeling this impatience into an open-mindedness of who do I get to work with. And so the thing that's often missing is how do you channel that in a productive way we come in with that civic infrastructure to give them the permission structure, honestly, in a lot of ways, to say like, hey, before you see that person as a D or an R, just see them as a fellow 30-year-old who also has, a 2-year-old at home, who's also trying to figure out how to, navigate this bill through their committee. And that just sort of shifts their mindset and then offers them additional governing partners to get things done.
It's also interesting, Layla, as you're speaking about it, because I'm thinking about how, so Jolene and I are Gen Xers, and we are young-spirited and want to be part of your crew, by the way. But that being said, like, we came up and you could still be friends. Like, there wasn't this toxic culture that there is now. So I'm thinking about this generation that you're working with that has had no modeling, but they have a desire and probably a frustration and an over itness. Like, hey, we need to make this work. We need to figure out a different way. And number one, I completely love it. This is so why We've Got to Talk exists. In my other life, as an actor, I had a thing where I created this program as infrastructure. It's I'm wondering if it's similar, where I use like acting techniques to help social workers, lawyers, where you'd go in and like cut the hierarchy out and like, let's play together, see each other as humans. And you would shift the dynamic so that when someone was maybe having a hard time, the boss brain stopped and went, oh, I remember you. Like, I see you as a human and let's work together. And so that's to me kind of what is super exciting to me for like, I'm thrilled you exist. I'm thrilled that Future Caucus exists because Jolene and I are sick of this shit. We are sick of it. Like, enough. And there are times that whatever it is that we're going to work on the Social Security monster. That's one of our topics coming up. We're looking at all these hearings, and there's this feeling that keeps happening where you like, an R comes up, and I get my haunches up, and then I go, wait a second. No. Take that away, take a deep breath, and just start listening to this person. And you find that when you let that go, you're like, wait, I kind of agree with this. Or, that's a good point. I'm not just going to be mad, but we're so trained to, get our haunches up. And I feel like it's really exciting work what you're doing. I know this isn't really a question, but it's more of an affirmation of what you're talking about. One thing I wanted to say was that what Jolene was expressing, that I'm impatient and frustrated because I want, listen, I think some of the experience is great, but we've said this a billion times. I think a lot of the boomers need to get out. Like, enough. You did your job. You did great. Even the Gen Xers were like, can we be grown-ups now? Like, are we allowed? Like, it's our time, right?
Yeah.
But all to say that I also think it could be really cool, since you already have this structure, this infrastructure, to maybe do workshops with these boomers and like get them in the room, have the kids, like, teach them some things.
Yeah. Okay. So what I was going to say is I love that you built sort of programming around play and around bringing people together to unwire our little like animal brains that are sort of like scarcity mindset often, or like conflict driven, because when you play, there's so much psychology around what that does for your ability to like connect with other people and then to actually move forward through whatever issue arises. And that's actually one of our bedrock principles is we're not actually coming in and bringing a Democrat and a Republican together and saying, sit down, you're going to talk about Social Security right now. The first thing that we do is some version of play. We'll have a fun dinner in Kansas. The Kansas Future Caucus did, as one of their first activities, an axe throwing night where people from the future,
not at each other.
Not at each other. And they had the drinks after the axe throwing, I think. So no legislators were harmed. And that's actually one where older members of the Kansas state legislature came and joined them, because there's like an aura there's a vibe that people want to be a part of.
Yeah.
Because you're totally right. Like, people are sick of it. People are hungry for things that feel positive, that feel constructive, and at its best, to offer them a feeling of belonging. And you actually don't get that by saying, let's just like get straight to the policy products that we want to create. You actually have to have a really human experience first, and you have to do it more than one time. It can't be just like you go axe throwing once and then you never actually like return to that feeling of connection or that feeling of play or that feeling of like we're more than just this issue. Because here's the thing, in politics, you are going to disagree, and you should disagree. Like, that's how we've designed this country of 340 million people who all have different life experiences and different perspectives. A democracy is supposed to take those different ideas and points of view and like allow them to be in conflict with one another so that we might sort of like emerge with whatever the path forward is. It's like on our money, right? Like e pluribus unum, out of many one. It's like one of the most important things that we should do. And so you are going to have conflict, but if you've had this more human connection first, if you have a sense of respect and trust in the person across the table from you, you can argue and you can disagree and you cannot hate them. You cannot let that rot your heart and inform your brain the next time you're trying to work with them on something that holds you back from like showing up fully or from actually like giving them the benefit of the doubt or actually hearing what it is they're saying. It'll allow you, having that human connection, it'll allow you to like disagree, go apart, and then come back on the next issue and like work through that with like full positive intention and full productivity. And so I think the way that most of our politics is organized is trying to get to that like end goal of like, what is the legislation, who is like winning this election, like all of these like really important things, but it misses that super important first step of like, how do you build a base of trust, respect, and joy, honestly, in what it is that we're all doing here together in the first place.
What are the things that are holding back younger people from running for office? So, and whether that's in the state legislature, whether that's Congress, you know, we read the exit interview piece that I thought that was really good. We'll put that in the show notes so that everybody can read that. Tell us what would be some of the things what are the barriers to entry?
Oh man, Jolene, you just opened such a big topic. Okay, but before I tell you what makes it hard, can I just say that we're seeing more and more young people decide to run for office, despite
That's
maybe
awesome.
It's because they don't know how hard it's going to be. But we are seeing more people decide that they have a sense of agency and that they want to lead in their community. People, we saw a lot of this in COVID, where nurses or scientists who noticed that the decisions being made were having these impacts without necessarily people with their background, like medical or scientific background, at the table. And so they were like, great, I should run for office. The solution is me. So we're seeing people like really have these great intentions in why they decide to run in the first place. And I think that's just important to say, because most people, maybe not your listeners, but a lot of people think about a politician as somebody who's in it for power and somebody who's in it for money. And I just want to say that is not the experience that we have had, and that is by and large not the lawmakers that we have met. And we have met legislators in every single state and Congress, thousands of them over the years. Basically, all of them run because they want to make things better, and they see public policy as a way that they can do that. We'll have a report come out in September called On the Rise that'll share a little bit more data, but over the past few election cycles, we've seen a steady increase in the number of millennials and a giant jump in the number of Gen Zers running for office. So that's super encouraging. Okay, now the bad part.
Before we get to the bad part, because maybe this is the Future Summit that you just did in July, is that where the exit interviews came from? Are those the people that are already in office? I didn't understand I've been following you on Instagram, but I love it. But I was like, I'm not sure who these people are.
Who's here? Yeah, great question. And we really work with people who are already in elected office. Okay. Obviously, in an election year, a lot of them are both in office and running for re-election, but we work with people after Election Day. I like to say, people tend to get really fixated on who gets into office, who gets elected, and basically nobody except for weirdos like us at Future Caucus think about what happens after Election Day. And so everyone who comes to Future Summit, everyone who's in a Future Caucus, anyone who's part of any of our national programming, those are all current sitting elected officials. But we do hope that their positive leadership, their example, them as role models, that inspires a broader set of candidates in the future, although that's not really the primary goal. The primary goal is let's help you be successful. Let's help you build those relationships so that we can have more bipartisan collaboration. And then let's sort of show to the public what democracy delivering results looks like to really inspire more faith, I think, in our institutions.
Is the Future Summit and the Future Innovation Lab, are they different?
So the Future Summit, you can think of, it happens every July. So it's halfway through the year. Okay, think about yourself when it's New Year's Eve and you're okay, I'm going to make these 5 New Year's resolutions for the next year. I'm going to keep my house really clean. I'm going to cook every night. I'm going to, lose 5 pounds. I'm going to do all these things. And then you get to July and you're man, the first few months of the year really kicked my butt. I'm feeling kind of demotivated. This is hard. So you can think of Future Summit as this midpoint where it's for state legislators. So all of their state sessions have sort of happened. Most of them are done by then. And a lot of them had losses. A lot of them had bills that they really cared about that didn't go through, or a lot of them had just challenging experiences. And so Future Summit at its core is to create a meeting point of all of our lawmakers to reconnect with each other and to say, we got this. More than anything, we do policy sessions, we do leadership development sessions, we have great speakers, we do social events, all of that. So we do all the things that you do at a conference, but really the purpose is you are not alone. And there are so many people who have your back and are cheering for your success. It might not feel like that when you're sitting across the table from somebody who is fighting you tooth and nail on the thing that you're trying to get done. But there is a network of individuals who, just like you, are doing the same thing in Georgia, in Alaska, in Maine, all over the country. And if you need something, they're just a phone call away. And
and what a great resource for them.
Totally.
Once they leave that, to be able to call somebody and go, okay, you were talking about this. I remember this. How did you get through this? Now they just have a network that they wouldn't have had.
Exactly. And so this year's Future Summit was so cool. On the last day, we had a bill share where we just left the mic on the stage and you could just walk up. You didn't have to tell us ahead of time and say, here's something I'm really proud of that I did this year. Right? Because I think
that's so nice.
Friends bond by venting. So we want to create plenty of time for venting. And I'll get back to the exit interview because a lot of these themes did come out of the venting. But also, they had a lot of wins. Actually, a lot of great things happened this year. And so we create a moment for them to get up and talk about legislation or a coalition they built. And I'm just thinking of, there's a woman in Colorado who got up there and she's yeah, I was just talking to this person from the other party in Utah, and he told me about a bill that he got passed around privacy, data privacy. And I had just tried something similar and it didn't pass, but he told me about how he got it done. And now I know how I'm going to get the people in the other party on board based on what he shared. So I'm going to take that back to Colorado and do that.
It's great.
Same thing, with a woman in Rhode Island who talked about lactation coverage that she now offers in Rhode Island. She had learned about that from what got passed in a much more conservative state in Georgia. And somebody in Georgia who had who was a progressive lawmaker in Georgia who had learned about expansions to maternal health that she borrowed from a super conservative lawmaker in Arkansas. So it's just really cool to have this like opportunity for people to see each other again, first as people, and then they start to like really listen to and like actually hear what it is that they're getting done for their constituents. So it's really fun. And we take them to do karaoke, which is like always a very bonding moment.
Okay.
So once you've like been singing Alanis Morissette at the top of your lungs in front of people, like there is a level of trust that, you know, is really important.
That is awesome. Okay, so go back then to give me the bad news.
Yeah, Jolene wants the
what
bad
are the
news.
Things?
I know.
I just because I think this is a really important part. Yeah,
it blew our minds what was going on.
Yes, and if we want more young people, because I think we all, and even as a conservative, you know, that was one of the reasons that we voted for Trump in the first time was we wanted a business person. We wanted somebody to come in here and look at things differently and have a different perspective and not the same old, same old. And so I think this is so important because now we're seeing this not from either a Republican and Democrat perspective, but let's get fresh blood. Let's get new people. So what are some of the downsides? What's preventing people from being successful as either legislators or Congress people? So,
and like certainly as a candidate, I do think that money in politics is tough, and the amount that a candidate would need to fundraise, and oftentimes, especially younger people, are not as connected to networks of wealth as some of their older opponents, and so that is a huge barrier. I'll say on the flip side, I think, you know, the playing field is leveling a little bit now, but younger people as digital natives do have a really important advantage in how they may be able to use social media to get their message out there without needing as many, you know, dollars to throw towards like traditional advertising. And so, you know, and you see sometimes actually even this election cycle, people who get outspent like 3-1 still actually eke out a win in the primary because they've been so effective at getting their message out there in other ways, ways that are like authentically resonating with the voters. And so that's what I'll say on the candidate side. I do think sort of money and fundraising is probably one of the biggest barriers. And then, you know, our perspective is maybe a little unique at Future Caucus because people think a lot, like I said, about who gets elected and how to recruit the right people to run. We think a lot about retention. Once that person wins, how do we make sure that they're not just serving one term where they're like just learning the ropes, really, and then burning out or deciding not to run again because it was too hard or, you know, for any number of reasons. And so, you know, I don't think, we were talking about this before. I don't think people need to serve in office for like 60 years. I think there's lots of ways to help your community. But, you know, more than one term is helpful for your community to see you sort of rise into positions of leadership that can really make a difference. So a couple of the things that we've seen be difficult, especially for state legislators, is, I'm going to ask you a question, but if you know the answer off the top of your head, then I'm going to say it in a more dramatic way so that it's more fun for the listeners. Okay.
Do it.
How much do you think a state legislator makes per year?
$43,000.
Jolene did her homework.
Oh my God, Jolene is obsessed with the numbers. I'm telling you.
The average American makes $20,000 more than that. So the average state legislator is earning $20,000 less than the average American, which means that as the cost of living goes up in different states, as housing gets more expensive, if you're a state legislator, you probably have at least a second job, if not a third job, or you happen to come from a lot of money where your salary actually doesn't really matter to you that much.
Isn't that also a little tricky in terms of the numbers because a lot of state legislators are part-time, like, but
and I love that you just did air quotes around part-time because things like answering constituent phone calls or helping people when like a traffic light is broken. Like that's not just during the 30 or 60 days of session. That really is full year. And so I do think you're right, Nicole. Like there's a variation between people who are like formally in session for the whole year versus just part-time, quote unquote part-time legislatures. But I think that there's probably a minimum amount that some states have done a good job making sure that if you're going to be able, like, let's say you're a teacher, I think it's really valuable to have teachers serve in the legislature. Kind of difficult to step away from your teaching job for like 3 months out of the year and say, I'll be back the rest of the, I know it's just a part-time job. Like I'll be teaching the rest of the year. Your principal would say, no, you're just not going to be a teacher the whole year.
Right.
And so how do you make it possible for them to sort of do that, and for us as, Americans and voters to have people with lots of different perspectives?
Because Jolene and I were talking about this a lot. Like, how does that even work? Like, how do you make a living? How do you...
Yeah. I think so one of the recommendations that we make in the exit interview is to look at establishing independent pay commissions in different states to evaluate this question. And, what is affordable in one state is different in another state. So there's not really like a blanket national recommendation that I think makes sense. But in states like Oregon and Kansas and, all across the country, they have set up independent pay commissions that look at both legislator salaries as well as all public employees to think about like, what are some of the automatic like inflationary growth numbers that we should be baking into this, and what is right for us to be able to have a diversity of perspectives serve in office without creating like a permanent political class where I think for a lot of a lot of legislatures, like New Hampshire is a great example. New Hampshire has a very proud history of citizen legislature. They each make $100 a year.
Oh, gosh.
So, and I don't think we're going to change that to be like, you're making $60,000 a year. And so, like, what New Hampshire would recommend is probably different from what, another state. But pay is actually just one part of the problem. We see that state legislatures across the board are not investing in, like, things that you might assume are just a part of the job, like staff. Most state legislators don't actually have staff. They don't have policy staff. They don't have comm staff. Any bill that needs to be, voted on or debated is being literally read by the legislator themselves. Any phone call that comes in with a problem is being handled by the legislator themselves. Any like proactive idea that they want to come up with to have on their policy platform is being come up with the legislator themselves. They're alone. And so
how many states do you think that is?
Probably about like 28.
Over half don't have any staff?
Yes.
I mean, no wonder they feel alone. Seriously.
You know what? I should say that's not fair. They don't have zero staff. In most of these states, there is a shared staffer that helps several lawmakers. So in like Georgia, for example, there is one staffer that helps 8 legislators. So you do have 1/8 of one admin's time.
And
so
why,
just to be fair.
But why is that? I mean, we just don't want, as states, we don't want to spend money on that. I don't understand why that is.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons for that, and probably one of the biggest is investment. It costs money to have people, and it's just hasn't been a part of what the legislatures have done. And so we do think that is something that would, especially if we want to keep it so that people, I'll just say, I think that investing in staff, investing in technology actually to make the job more efficient, especially today, right, where there's like lots of ways where you don't have to be doing so many manual things. That could be a really good solution to help legislators do more of the like brain work and less of the like more ticky-tacky stuff, make things a little bit easier. And then two other things that I want to share in terms of like barriers to retention, things that are hard that emerged out of the exit interview findings. Some of the like cultural norms around what happens when you get elected and when you're in the legislature need to be updated. So for example, and this is true in Congress, when you get elected and you go to your onboarding, which is really more about like, here's where the bathrooms are, and not like, this is your job description as a member of Congress, which would be nice. But then they send you to this retreat and they have two different buses, one for the Democrats and one for the Republicans. And that just sets such a bad tone from day one. And so there are things from the get-go that could create more of a sense of like, we are a team together, and then continued infrastructure. And this is, you know, some of where Future Caucus tries to plug the gap, but I think there are lots of other things that we could do to strengthen the institutional capacity to create a better culture. You know, we were talking before the podcast started, I'm a new mom. One of the things that we heard from a lot of parents, like lawmakers who are parents, was that there's unpredictable scheduling often that makes it really tough for them to like figure out if they actually can go to daycare to pick up their kid or to plan family life around what's going to be happening in the legislature, which, listen, is true in a lot of jobs, but I think those are not policy changes. Those could be rules changes, things that offer a little bit more predictability that allow people like parents or caregivers who have, you know, aging family members or responsibilities to more fully participate. So sort of a set of institutional reforms. Okay, and then the last thing, so we did this report thinking that we were going to hear complaints from people about we don't get paid enough, which honestly was a big part of what we heard. But the single biggest thing that is a barrier to lawmaker retention is political violence.
Yeah, when we read that, that was horrifying. Yeah. It's horrifying.
It's horrifying. Some of the quotes that we heard, somebody told us a story about a man who was threatening her online. And often these are really difficult cases to bring to trial, but she actually did successfully get a trial with this man who had been like, you know, leveraging death threats to her. And in the courtroom, he stood up and he admitted it. He said, yeah, of course I threatened to kill her, but who hasn't wanted to kill a politician?
Oh.
And he was acquitted. He got off.
Okay, there's no way. Like,
yes.
On what grounds? Like, what there had to, he had to have had, the state had a horrible lawyer or something on that. I mean, how in the heck does that happen?
I mean, the impact of that is if you're the legislator who not only has the trauma of feeling like, oh my God, I could die, I could get killed, and then you try to go through the system to do something about it and you feel like the system doesn't have your back, like that changes your calculus about, do I even want to run next year? Again, especially if you have family or other people you care about that you're like, I'll put myself in danger, but you know.
My kid's out there playing T-ball. No. I mean, do I want them to be a target?
Yeah,
right.
People know where you live. People know where your kids go to school. Right. In a lot of legislatures, there's like a million doors and no security. So anybody can come in with, you know, any kind of weapon. And the culture, the heat keeps rising. The temperature in this country and the vitriol is getting worse and worse. And so I think people are running for office because they want to solve a problem. They feel a sense of responsibility and agency, and they know that they can make a difference. And we are on the verge, I think, of a massive retention crisis of the very lawmakers who are best positioned to actually make our democracy work better because of political violence and some of these, I think, very solvable issues. But the political violence piece is really driving a lot of great leaders out of service.
But I think we see this just, you know, in a society as a whole. I mean, you know, I think we, as you talk about making changes in the infrastructure and technology and all that, I mean, we're doing that on a business sense. You know, how many of us work from home now and we're able to run organizations from our, you know, office at home? Surely we're making enough technological advances that we could extend that into our political structures and infrastructures to be able to make things, more equitable for a young person versus an older person and their needs and all that. But I would say that too, from the political violence standpoint, we got to start somewhere, right? So I think the work that you're doing is so important because we're starting, at the very foundational level of, okay, let's quit this, R versus D mentality, and hopefully that will extend to quiet some of the, the political rhetoric that we see online and leads to violence.
Yeah, I think so. And we saw some really amazing moments of solidarity and real leadership after, last year, Speaker Melissa Hortman in Minnesota was assassinated along with her husband and their dog. And in the moments right after that, we have a Signal group chat with all of our legislators.
I wondered about that. If you had a group chat.
It's amazing. It's a fantastic group chat. Can neither confirm nor deny anything else that happens in the group chat. But I will say, like, right after that happened, there was a lot of misinformation and chaos and fear. And that group chat was a sense of like real support. People who were in that group chat were on the list that the assassin was later found with. There are people from Minnesota. There are people in other states. There were, all sorts of crazy things being said online. But I think in that moment, the lawmakers feeling a sense of like connectedness to each other, a sense of we can share factual information, and then how that informs how we then go back to our districts or our communities to help like create calm was so, so valuable. And we saw the same thing later that year after Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And not only do I think the sense of like, how do we sort of like come together and, there's an effort, Spencer Cox in Utah called Disagree Better. Like, how do we come together and disagree better? But then the legislators themselves actually releasing statements like calling for a reduction in political violence. And, we had in Indiana, like a Democrat and a Republican stand up and like say together, like, this is not okay. And I think a sense of when you say political violence, it feels so big and unsolvable. And we really believe that part of the solution is good leadership. And the more that we can model what is okay and what is not okay and like hold each other accountable to that, and to have that be bipartisan, to have that be coming from lots of different people, I think that is one of the ways out of this situation. And it's been really inspiring to see these leaders, these young leaders, stand up and, be those leaders that I think America is really hungry for.
I would agree. I mean, we've talked about so many different topics on our show about, what we can do to make the whole political scene better. And I just think this is a fundamental way to start. So I thought this has been really good.
Layla, and thank you for blossoming Future Caucus. How about? And, I'm really loving that. I mean, I'm also horrified by your telling me that there are two buses. I'm like, there's the problem. There it is right there. It should just be one big bus, one big bus of Americans just hanging out and then playing together. And then we get
how about the congressional baseball game is Republicans versus Democrats. I mean, here we have got a game and it's,
but I'm really like the fact that you are trying to heal this is really inspiring to me and to Jolene, and I'm sure to our listeners and viewers. Before we get into the good for the soul, I think there are a couple things. Number one, to find out more, it's futurecaucus.org. Is that correct?
That's right.
Is there any, and then I hear on the grapevine that you guys have a podcast coming out. Is this also correct?
We do have a podcast coming out. So we have partnered with Talkin' Politics and Religion Without Killing Each Other with Corey Nathan, and he has handed over the steering wheel to us for the next few months.
And fun.
So I'll be launching a little mini podcast to anyone who, listens to that podcast as well, called Terms of Service. And I interview bipartisan members of state legislatures who jumped into public service, some of them without reading the terms and conditions about what goes into it, but all about what keeps them there, where they see opportunities for change, and why they think that doing it across party lines is the way forward. And so
that is great.
By the time this episode comes out, we should have our first episode out. I interview 2 members from Minnesota, actually, and I talk about sort of that really difficult moment that they went through together and sort of what that has looked like in the months since. You know, a lot of stuff has happened in Minnesota, so they're a great first pair. But we'll have more episodes dropping monthly, so please follow us there.
Yes, so I will get the information and put it in the show notes so that everyone can start listening to.
Great.
Yeah, of course, to Terms of Service. That's awesome. Since we ended more on a high note, maybe. How about a Good for the Soul?
So I recently reread The Little Prince. Have you read The Little Prince?
No.
It is about a little prince, shocking, who crash lands in the desert and tells this story about his travels to many different planets, meeting many different kings of those planets, and his own journey to get back home. And I read it I grew up speaking French. I read it originally. It's called Le Petit Prince in French. So I read it when I was a kid. And I just reread it, a few months ago as an adult. And it really struck me that it's a story for kids, but it's a story for grown-ups too, because it's about what we lose sight of as we get older and become leaders ourselves. He visits a planet with a king that's, very obsessed with power. He visits a planet with a king, a businessman who's just obsessed with like counting things and having things. It's all of these sort of like absurd people who are in charge, quote unquote, but who have lost sight of the real things that matter. And the story really, I think, for me, reminds me that relationships are what give meaning to life, and there's a connection between love and responsibility. And he talks about this rose on his home planet that he like takes care of, and it just is like such a moving book that is like there's like a picture on every page, so it's very easy to read. But it has this really, really beautiful and I think enduring message for all of us grown-ups who maybe need to reconnect with our sense of
It's so good.
childlike wonder.
We will put that
That's
in the
really
show
cool.
notes for sure.
That
All
is
right,
great.
Jolene's going to hit you with a Would You Rather.
Layla, would you rather pay state legislators more and risk creating career politicians, or pay them less and risk making public office accessible only to the wealthy?
Ooh, that is hard. Well, I think that the situation that we are in now is pretty similar to option 2.
To the latter, yes.
The option to serve being closed off to people who are either lucky enough to come from a lot of wealth or be married into it. And so I think I would definitely go with increase the salaries for state legislators, partially because I think, like, from my experience running an organization and seeing sort of young people in the workforce, like, young people don't want to stay in a job that long anyway. So I think we're going to...
That is true.
Point.
That is really true.
Holy cow.
I think that people are going to, be happy to move on to the next thing. Especially if, we're not making the salaries be like absolutely like completely lucrative.
Or as we're seeing in Congress right now, they go in, having a, $200,000 net worth, but they come out being a multi-millionaire.
Right.
You're like,
That's right.
How did that happen at $173,000 a year?
That's right. I was just thinking about that yesterday. I think there's like a website that tells you what like Nancy Pelosi has invested in, and you can like
Oh,
Follow
Jolene knows that site. She is into that site.
No, but it's both
they
sides.
traded
I mean, no,
Cisco
it's
today.
everybody.
Totally.
I mean, it's they're like, no, I didn't do it, but my daughter did, and that's okay. What? How did that happen?
Yeah. No, that's not okay.
It is not okay.
Mine is going to be weird. So
Love weird.
it's very
we're
weird,
good with weird.
but it is one that I do like literally ask my friends sometimes.
Okay.
So
Does that
this
mean
is
we've
from-
crossed over?
I think we're friends.
I think we're friends too.
Okay.
I
do
think
too.
we're
I'm
friends.
totally into
All
it.
right.
All
Okay,
right.
and because you're my friend, I would love to know, would you rather every baby you see looks like a muffin, or every muffin you see looks like a baby?
Okay, this is so weird. I love it. And
Yes.
it's kind of twisted, Layla.
It is. Do you have any follow-up questions I can answer?
If the baby...
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead, Joe.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, if
Go.
the baby looks like a muffin, is there like a pull that I want to eat the muffin? Or is it just like, this is so weird, the babies look like muffins, and then the
Yeah.
muffins look like babies?
You would have the same relationship to muffins that you have now. So if you love muffins, you might see it and say, oh man, I want to eat it.
Okay, no, then I love it. I want all muffins to look like babies. Because I just want to see more babies, because then I just want to eat them anyway.
I know, I want to eat the
And
babies
so, yes. And so then I'm like, oh, that muffin was delicious because it was fat and it had fat little
Okay.
rolls on its legs. And
So you feel confident that you'll not accidentally bite into a real baby?
oh,
Because there are still babies, but just the muffins also look like babies.
Okay, wait a minute. The
Oh.
babies...
okay.
The babies look like muffins and the muffins look like babies. So basically, you're eating a baby or you're eating a muffin and they're switched.
Yeah. Or you're holding a baby and it's a muffin. Or you're...
So not until it crumbles,
I don't have
then
big.
are you
I
gonna
don't
know?
have big muffin dreams. Like I don't have that pull. I like a good corn muffin, but otherwise, I don't really care about muffins. So if the muffins are the babies, it's just more babies, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
just want more
I have one
babies.
more question though. Do the babies that are the muffins, do they cry? I'm really not into the crying.
You...
Says a woman who's never given birth.
That's right. Listen, I was a stepmama that I raised that child, and that is not easy.
Yeah. No, if the baby was a muffin, it wouldn't make any sounds. You wouldn't have to change any diapers.
Oh, that's
it would
it.
just be a muffin.
I want the muffin to be a baby. Is that right?
Yeah.
All muffins to look like babies.
Okay.
Because it'd be kind
Yeah,
of cute.
I'm with her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the risk is too high that you eat a
Yeah, I
muffin
don't-
and then
yeah,
you realize you
that's
just ate a baby.
That gets real dark. That
Yeah.
gets just like politics.
God, I ate your
It's
baby.
just-
I'm so
well, just like
sorry.
politics.
It was delicious. That's right. Just like politics.
Just like politics.
Weird, dark, and potentially like will
Eating
grow
the
into
baby
something
by accident.
Grow into something beautiful.
Wow.
All right, well-
wow.
Layla, thank you, new friend. We've got to talk.
Yes.
Is so psyched to know you, and thank you so much for coming on. We are thrilled.
Thank you for your work.
Yeah.
I think you're doing great work, and we're excited to talk to you about it. And hopefully, we'll talk again in the future as this grows and we get a whole new generation of young people that can help us out.
I hope so. Well, thank you
Good
both
stuff.
for having me, and you're both honorary Future Caucus members. So welcome.
Yay! All right, futurecaucus.org, right?
futurecaucus.org, and we're on Instagram and social media, LinkedIn, everywhere as Future
Perfect.
Caucus.
Perfect. We will put that all in the show notes. Layla, thank you. We will
Thank
see
you.
We will see you
Thank
next
you,
time.
everybody, for listening and joining us. And please subscribe and like us and send your comments in. We love to read them.
Yes.
Thanks,
thank you.
everybody.
Bye. We've Got to Talk is produced across the world by the wildly talented, creative, and hilarious team at Bambi Media. Our theme song is Jump Jive Swing by Space Train Unlimited. Thank you so much for listening, and join us every week for another episode of We've Got to Talk.